What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome to the reveal of the number 22 team in my 2022 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Detroit Lions. Now, before we get started, a quick reminder, please do hit that like button down below if you like the series. That is the easiest way to support my channel and help this video get more views, so my appreciation in advance. All right, time to discuss these middling Detroit Lions coming in at the 22 spot in my power rankings. But the first thing I need to get out of the way is don't let the fact that this team picked third overall in last year's draft fool you, because this team is simply a better football team than their 3 wins in 2019 would suggest. Not only did their quarterback miss the back end of last season, but this team also went 3-8-1 in games decided by 1 score. So without getting too far into the excuses and looking back at last year, really, if you just look at the games they played with Matthew Stafford, this team played in mostly close games against a lot of tough playoff caliber teams. So if nothing else, this Lions team showed that they're not some cellar dweller and they can at least hang in the NFL. But there is a big difference between being some cute, scrappy underdog that other teams don't necessarily want to see on Sundays and being a legitimate playoff caliber squad who consistently plays at a high level on a week-to-week basis. And that is going to be the big question here for Detroit in 2020. And this is also, in my opinion, definitely going to be a prove-it year for head coach Matt Patricia, who definitely, to me, sits on one of the hottest seats in the league as far as keeping his job. So in this video, we're going to analyze the roster position by position, talk about where some of the more under-the-radar talent on this roster is that leads to them being ranked a few spots higher than many have expected. We'll rank each position group, how they stack up with the rest of the league. While we do that, you will be looking at my own custom Madden roster. So yes, I realize it is a video game, but they are my own ratings. It's a nice copyright-free graphic to use to show you how I perceive each player. So just keep that in mind. Then we're going to take a look at this team's schedule, their Vegas over-under, and talk about my overall win total expectations for this team. Now, before we go through the roster, I just want to talk about this coaching staff and some of the, not even moving pieces, just sort of dynamics here. So they're going to rank 23rd for overall coach and culture, 23rd for offense, 24th for defense, just kind of a meh, uninspiring group here. I mentioned Matt Patricia, definitely a or get off the pot type of season here. He's had 2 years to implement what he sees fit on the defensive side of the ball with this hybrid Belichickian defense. It has to click this year, and this defense has to look like a cohesive, consistent unit. It just hasn't been that to this point, and I am not going to sit here and say that I believe in Matt Patricia to be the guy to get that done at this point in time. I think he could. He knows what he wants to do. I don't know if he knows how to do it, though, if that makes sense. And then on the offensive side of the ball, it really is just Darrell Bevell's offense. Matt Patricia is putting most of his time and energy into the defense here. And Darrell Bevell, as the offensive coordinator here, I actually was fairly impressed with what he did. I don't mind him as the offensive coordinator at all. I think we would actually see if Patricia were to get fired here, and that's a different tangent. I think Bevell would take over as the interim head coach and give himself an opportunity to really prove himself. I was more or less impressed with the offense that Bevell implemented, especially kind of moving the ball here after Matthew Stafford went down. So I do like the offense coordinator, and you're in a position there where he might not be a head coach caliber coach, but that's a good spot to be for teams because you're not going to lose him to another team, and you can kind of keep him in there as the offense coordinator. So I don't really have a bad thing to say about Darrell Bevell. I don't think he's some offensive genius, but I think he's a very quality offensive coordinator in this league. So they're going to rank kind of near the bottom here, 23rd, 24th for coach and culture. Let's now go through the roster, starting with the quarterback position. Matthew Stafford going to get the 10th spot in my quarterback positional rankings. I definitely lean on the side of being pro Matthew Stafford. He's not a perfect player. You know, his processor isn't perfect. He will miss some throws here or there, but he has all of the physical tools. He is, in general, above average as far as his processor and decision making. I think once Calvin Johnson left here, something really flipped in his mind. He became so much less dependent on Calvin and really started seeing the field a lot better, even sensing pressure and extending plays better. He does everything at an above average level, and he has an exceptional arm, and in general is one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the league, especially in the deep passing game, and he will let it rip. So I have no problems with Matthew Stafford. He actually was really impressive last year. We talked about a lot of close games that this team played in, and it was in large part due to what Matthew Stafford was doing. I don't want to say carrying this team, but certainly being the face of this team, being that at least franchise quarterback. I don't want to say elite quarterback, but you get where I'm going here. Like, I think Stafford is a really solid quarterback. He's a big reason that this team is going to rank a lot higher than a lot of people expected. So you do have questions about that lower back and if he can stay healthy. From the outside looking in, it looks like he should be good to go for this season. And if this team's going to push things forward here and be a playoff caliber team, ranking them here at 22nd, by the way, they are absolutely a playoff caliber team if all of these things can click together. If that happens, Matthew Stafford is going to be at the forefront of it. Then they have a good career backup in Chase Daniel. Now, this team's not good enough to be relevant with Chase Daniel, but if you lose Stafford for a concussion or, God forbid, or, he goes down for a game or two, Daniel can step in and give you a chance to win individual games. And then you have David Blau, who had like one or two good games last year and then showed that he's just a backup. So there's your quarterback room. They rank 10th. That is certainly not a question mark for this team. I don't think at this stage Stafford's ever going to emerge as an elite quarterback. We kind of know what his weaknesses are at this point, but he is still a very, very capable top 10 quarterback in my opinion. Then let's talk about the running back room here. You're going to have a really dynamic 1-2 punch here between Kerryon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. And these guys, I would say, as far as what they bring to the table, are relatively similar. Schematically and stylistically, they are a little bit different, though. So Kerryon is explosive. I think about outside zones, a little bit a power element to his game. And then DeAndre Swift, who was most people, myself included, number one running back in the 2020 NFL draft. He, I think, a little more of a patient runner, inside zone, shiftiness. He does have some burst to the outside. I think both of these guys can really do anything, and bringing in Swift was because Kerryon Johnson just hasn't been able to stay healthy, and I really like both of these backs as, I'm just going to say, top 20 starting caliber, 3-down, do-it-all backs. So I like what they have here. I don't think you're going to have any questions about the running back room. You would assume that any given week, one of these two guys will be healthy. I don't think either are going to have crazy seasons because I do imagine a pretty solid workload here. But a lot of teams have shown that can work. So I like this running back room. They rank 9th. I have nothing bad to say about Swift or Kerryon Johnson. And then you do even have a sort of bruising LeGarrette Blount type of goal line vulture in Bo Scarborough out of Alabama. He got some starts last year and looked like a capable NFL caliber power back. And then you have Ty Johnson. He's more of that scat back. He's going to have a hard time seeing the field. They might get him involved on some trick plays, some jet sweeps and stuff. But for the most part, he's basically just going to be a backup here. They also draft Jason Huntley in the 5th round. Between Johnson and Huntley, you are getting some of that explosive element in there. But again, I don't see either of them seeing the field all that much outside of gimmick plays, trying to manufacture touches for these guys. So 9th for the running back room. So far, the roster's looking good, but that running back position just is not all that important. So next, let's talk about this receiving group that's going to rank 19th. And when I really plugged all my calculations in, I was surprised they came in this low. I think that speaks to a lot of middling teams really beefing up that ever so important wide receiver group, whereas Detroit has kind of stayed the same here. But there's a lot of names to talk about, and they have really good depth outside of Kenny Golladay. But are any of these options outside of Kenny going to be fear factor, elite mismatch problems, go-to parts of this offense? That's really what's up in the air here. But you do have that one guy in Kenny Golladay, who I think, if Stafford stays healthy and things can kind of stay the course with a lot of the things we saw with Darrell Bevell and this offense, I really think we're going to start talking about Kenny Golladay as a top 10 wide receiver in this league. And I am definitely a Kenny Golladay fan. He's frankly one of my favorite players in the entire NFL. And I'm definitely biased because I had him as a top 5 wide receiver in this class, of that class in 2017, ahead of a Mike Williams, who was the 8th overall pick. And he's outplayed him to this point in his career. But, I mean, the guy is physically built like AJ Green, and at this point in his career, he's starting to play like it. It's also a contract year for Kenny Golladay, so he's definitely a player that I look to. Like, can he have that 1,500-yard, 12-plus touchdown, all-pro season here? And I think my answer leans in the direction of yes. So I'm very optimistic for Kenny Golladay here. But beyond that, let's just talk about the receivers, and then we'll talk about TJ Hawkinson. You got Marvin Jones, who's a solid number 2 deep threat. He's clearly getting older. He's been a very solid deep threat throughout his career, and he's never been a true burner. Like, he's been pretty fast, but I think at 30 years old, he's starting to lose maybe a half a step, and it's showing. I think he's a good number 2 option. I'm not going to complain about it, but again, he's not bringing that sort of fear factor. And then after him, you got Danny Amendola in the slot, who's actually kind of prolonged his career longer than I would have expected. A guy that's he's just been riddled with injuries throughout his career. So when he's on the field, he's actually a good slot wide receiver, certainly a starting caliber one, and had a good year last year. Is he going to be able to stay healthy next year, another year older? Tough to project that, but you would hope so. Then you have Marvin Hall is a rotational deep threat. He's probably the fastest player on this offense outside of Johnson and Jason Huntley. But, he's going to get in the mix here and get some deep targets, and he'll probably catch 200 yards and have some nice chunk plays. You're just not getting that on a consistent level from him. He just doesn't do a whole lot other than run far and fast and track deep balls. And then you have Quintez Cephus, who, ironically, one of my comparisons for him was Marvin Jones. So it's a good replacement. And he's similar to Marvin Jones. He's not quite as fast, but he's similar in that his ability to track the ball and win with hand fighting and get body positioning on deep balls is unique. There's a lot of times at Wisconsin where their run game just wouldn't work, and they would end up with 3rd and long, and they would basically just throw go balls to Quintez Cephus, and he would come down with a lot of them. So I do like Quintez Cephus. I think he is a 30-year-old Marvin Jones, if that makes sense. If Marvin Jones is still a good quality number 2, but he's a little slower, I think Quintez Cephus can be that, never be the focal point of your offense, but in a pinch, be a good guy to throw a 50-50 ball too. So I like that pick. He's just not going to see the field a whole lot as long as Golladay and Marvin Jones are healthy. They bring in Geronimo Allison from Green Bay. He's simply put a backup to Danny Amendola out of the slot. I think Allison's a miserable football player, honestly. He has tons of drops. He doesn't block. He's skinny. He's not athletic. He doesn't get open. I don't really understand what Green Bay ever saw in Geronimo Allison. He hurt Green Bay more than he helped them last year. So I don't know if he'll make the team. You got Travis Fulgham, a 6th-round pick, Chris Lacey, Jeremy Davis, and Victor Bolden rounding out the receiver depth chart. So it's a decent wide receiver group. I really like Kenny Golladay, and I hope he can emerge as that true top 10 receiver next year. But we did not mention TJ Hawkinson, who was a top 10 pick in last year's draft class, coming out the closest thing to Rob Gronkowski at that tight end position that we've seen. I don't know if ever is the right word, but in a long time. He was an excellent tight end prospect. Ran, hard, sharp routes, great contested catch guy, excellent blocker, one of the better blocking tight ends to come out in a long time. Not as athletic as George Kittle coming out of Iowa, but still, like Gronk, can win those tough balls and make up for that lack of separation. Now, he did not do that as a rookie, simply put, but we've given a lot of tight ends the benefit of the doubt to develop in year 2. It just might be outside of, quarterback and maybe corner. It's up there for the biggest learning curves for these rookies because there's just so much to adjust to in the receiving game and in the blocking game. There's new schemes to learn. You just have so much to take in. You don't even have a full offseason to do it. So can TJ Hawkinson be like many tight ends who have come before him to take a big step up in year 2? And there's really no reason to believe he can't. But again, you can't project that he's just going to be some top 10 tight end all of a sudden just because they spent a top 10 pick on him. So I do like TJ Hawkinson. It's just a matter of, can he reach his potential? You have Jesse James, a good quality number 2 tight end. He's a good skill set. They have a lot of good, just kind of F-it ball type of receivers here with Galladay, Jones, Cephas, Hawkinson, Jesse James. These guys are really good jump ball targets, and Stafford does have a bit of that gunslinger mentality, so it's a good combination there with their quarterback. And then you have Isaac Nata, who's more of that blocking type, a 7th round pick last year. He is a good player to have. He's going to play special teams. And then you also have Hunter Bryant, who is kind of stapled in as the best undrafted free agent signing in the league. And I don't know if I agree with that. I understand the sentiment. But Hunter Bryant, when I went to watch him, at the time, he was most people's number 1 tight end. Because he's this 6'2", 240-pound tight end out of Washington who produces all these great athletes. And it was almost just assumed that at that size, he's going to be that sort of Evan Ingram, Noah Fant type of speedy tight end, modern mismatch problem. But then you watch him, and he's not very fast. He really is not. And he comes out the combine and runs a 4.75. And the problem with that is he doesn't block. He's not a great contested ball target. He's not a super fluid route runner. So what is he actually bringing to the table here? I wasn't all that surprised to see him go undrafted. I thought someone would have pulled the trigger on him in the 6th, 7th round, but when you really watch the guy play, he's not that impressive. The idea of Hunter Bryant is a lot more appealing than the actual player. So does he make the team? I don't know. We'll see. I don't have very high expectations, clearly. A lot of people do. I needed to bring him up as an undrafted signing here. We'll see. I just don't think there's a whole lot there. So 19th for the receiver ranking. Like I said, after Galladay, it's getting to the point that there's a lot of good receivers in the NFL right now. If you want to get in that top half ranking, you need a go-to number 2 option, a go-to number 3 option. And they have pieces, but none of these guys are really terrifying defensive coordinators. Then the offensive line, this is probably my biggest concern for this team as a whole this season. I thought they completely butchered free agency as far as handling this roster. So this was under the radar, one of the best offensive lines in the league last season. And they let their right guard, Graham Glasgow, and their right tackle, Rick Wagner, go. Now, Wagner, I can understand. He's getting up there in age. He's not a great pass blocker. He's better in the run game. But he's a starting caliber tackle, and he actually ended up going to Green Bay on a pretty budget deal for a starting tackle, like $5 million a year. But letting Graham Glasgow go, again, if you don't want to pay a guard that much money, I get it, but they gave that money to Hal Vaitai, who's been a swingman for Philly, who's been nothing short of a liability whenever he sees the field. They gave him over $10 million a year. I think it was 5 years, $50 million. I know that's not a true 5-year contract, but what a miserable use of resources, in my opinion. You, quite frankly, could have just kept this offensive line intact. I'd rather just keep Rick Wagner around instead of cutting him and let Glasgow go, or pay Glasgow and just roll with Tyrell Crosby, or draft a tackle in the 3rd or 4th round where this team spent guard resources. There's so many other things that this Lions team could have done that would have made me more optimistic for this offense to click as an entire unit. Now, you still have a good center left tackle duo. Taylor Decker is a good, not great tackle. He does need to be paid here. And Frank Ragnow emerged as one of the best centers in the NFL, a 1st-round pick in 2018, reaching his potential. This dude is a total beast. I project him to continue to grow and maybe even fight for the title of the best center in the league now that Frederick are gone and you've got Kelsey and Hudson getting up there in age. But everything else to me, I think, is going to be a concern. And I mean, God forbid this be a really bad offensive line and Matthew Stafford injures his back again because he's getting hit too much. So at left guard, you got Joe Dahl, who's fine. He's kind of a low-end starting caliber guard, but he's your third best lineman. And then your right guard's going to be an open competition, really, between a bunch of names. You've got Ode Ibushi, who has started games in this league, but he's at best a replacement level starter. Jonah Jackson was a good third-round pick. I would not be surprised at all if he won out, so I didn't mind that. You got Logan Stenberg. A lot of people liked. I was not nearly as high. I just think he's not physically talented enough to be a quality starting level guard, but we'll see. You got Caleb Benonic. Tyrell Crosby is a 5th-round tackle prospect from 2018 that I really liked. I honestly think Crosby's a better right tackle than Hal Vaitai, so we'll see how that works out. We already talked about Vaitai. I mean, he's just a plodding, massive dude that lacks technique. Sure, he's going to be able to contribute in the run game, but he's basically a very much worse version of Rick Wagner that you're paying more money. So I'm not optimistic about this offensive line, and this was a problem for Detroit several years ago, and they started to repair it, but then they just let it fall apart. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe they prove me wrong, but I overall think that they completely butchered this offseason, and with how important the offensive line is, I think this might be what we look back on and say, yeah, they kind of screwed that up, and who knows what this whole thing would have looked like under Patricia if they just didn't, lose a capable offensive line like that for no good reason. So offensively, they rank 19th. I think you have some hidden upside in there with guys like Golladay and Hawkinson. If they can reach their elite potential, maybe this offensive line comes together a little bit. Stafford stays healthy. It's a long shot, but there is enough talent here for this to all come together as a top 10 offense. I'm not going to predict that will happen, but it's a very solid offense. And I would say if this team is going to be a playoff team, because again, at 22 here, I'm not saying they can't make the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination. If it's going to happen, I think realistically it's going to be this offense coming together, Stafford having an outstanding season like we've seen in years past, and this being a top 10 offense, because when I look at this defense, it lacks star power, and if they're going to run this Belichickian defense, they lack Bill Belichick. I just don't think Matt Patricia has the defensive genius that Belichick does. So best case scenario for me for this defense is they can be a top 15 to 20 unit that puts things together. I rank them 23rd. So let's do our best effort here at putting this defense together, because it's a weaving hybrid defense with a ton of new names. I'm sorry if you get lost, but let's start with the run defense. And all of these Belichickian defenses, they are going to put a heavy emphasis on gap control, stopping the run. And I think that this team will do a better job of that this season than last year. The bodies they had here, the injuries they had on the interior of the defensive line really hurt this unit, but there's still some of that lingering here. They're going to rank 26th against the run. That's probably worst case scenario. So as far as the players here, all right, let's just go nose tackle. They have Danny Shelton and John Pennicini. Excellent example of not doing what the Cleveland Browns did when they originally drafted Danny Shelton like 12th overall, of making sure you have a good run-stuffing nose tackle, but not over-investing in it. Both Shelton and Pennicini, I do expect to rotate and play and be capable gap control nose tackles. Then you have your defensive ends in this scheme that are going to play anything from a 3-tech out to a 5-tech. These are your hybrid defensive ends in this scheme. The starters here I see being Trey Flowers and Deshaun Hand. Both are really, really good football players. Both will defend the run out of that position, and both will rush the passer at a pretty high level. Now, Flowers is going to be more of an edge than an interior, and Hand's going to be more of an interior than an edge. I think think of Deshaun Hand being Lawrence Guy here, and Trey Flowers being, well, Trey Flowers out of the New England scheme. But those are your starters, and then anyone behind them is just kind of rotational depth. John Atkins, Austin Bryant, keep an eye on him. What can he do in his second year, a 4th-round pick out of Clemson? He's a good backup to Trey Flowers. And then you have Romeo Okwara here, of course. I should have said his name first. He is definitely going to rotate as a part-time starter here as that bigger-bodied edge player, undersized interior player. Then you have Frank Herron, Kevin Strong, John Atkins, Nicholas Williams. Some of those guys won't make the team. Absolutely, though, keep an eye on Jashon Cornell. He was a 7th-round pick. He was one of my sleepers in this class. Did not receive a combine invite out of Ohio State, where he had a really nice season as a pass rusher. He replaced Draymond Jones in that same role as a interior rusher on 3rd downs and showed very similar skill set. Draymond Jones was a 3rd-round pick for Denver with a lot of promise. So Cornell a little older than Jones was coming out, but very similar player. So I like Jashon Cornell to make this team, and we'll talk about the pass rush shortly, but I think he could be an impact as an interior rusher for this team that is a bit of a missing piece here at the moment. So I really like Jashon Cornell. Definitely want to highlight him. So that's your front. Then you have the linebackers, which again, who's starting here? Who's playing where? We do know Jamie Collins coming in from New England is going to play that outside linebacker edge hybrid spot. Then you're going to have a competition probably between Christian Jones and Julian Okwara. And I love the combination of Julian and Romeo. I don't know if they're going to start, but I mean, not only are they brothers named Romeo and Julian, a great Shakespeare reference from the parents there, but in a base 3-4 defense. And again, I don't know if these guys are going to start next to each other, but you want versatile skill sets and cohesion in your front. You have Romeo as your bigger-bodied base 3-4 end, and his brother Julian being the hybrid edge outside linebacker, pass rush, coverage specialist. These guys' skill sets play off each other perfectly. So I love the idea of it. I don't know how high the ceiling is on either of these guys, but I love the addition and storyline that you have going on there, probably on the right side of this front for the most part. So you hope as a Lions fan that Okwara will beat out Christian Jones, who's just a replacement level rotational edge guy, hybrid guy. And then you have the middle linebackers here. We'll talk about them more when we get to the linebacker ranking. But ultimately, they are going to rank 26th for run defense, and that's mainly because they couldn't do it very well last year. Tough to give them the benefit of the doubt. But the bodies are certainly here now. I like the bodies more this year than last year. It's more a matter of Matt Patricia scheming these guys up, putting them in the right positions, coaching them up, and calling the right plays. There's definitely more upside in there than the 26th ranking. Now let's talk about the pass rush. Now we kind of talked about where these guys are going to be playing, but let's try to look at this as more of a traditional defense. When they do go nickel, you will see more traditional looks. So the edge rush is going to be Trey Flowers and then some combination of the Okwara brothers and maybe even a little bit of Jamie Collins off of the edge. So I do think it's an upgrade to what they had last year, which was basically just Trey Flowers. I think Jamie Collins and Julian Okwara are going to bring some spunk to this pass rush that was just flat out terrible last year. Flowers is getting paid like a number 1 guy. In reality, he's probably a high-end number 2, but the edge duo / trio / quadruplet could be worse. It's just not anything I'm really terrified of. Then you have the interior here, and that starts with Deshaun Hand getting healthy. And if he can't, the interior rush here is in serious trouble, and I can't stress that enough. Trey Flowers will play inside the tackles occasionally, but then you're taking away from your edge presence. Hand, as a rookie, was one of the better interior rushers in the entire league, but just completely fell off the map in his sophomore season. So definitely some red flags there, some cause for questions with Deshaun Hand. And after him, you got Shelton, who's not a pass rusher. Does Austin Bryant step into that role? John Atkins, Frank Herron. Now, we did mention Jashon Cornell. He's a 7th round pick. he's got some potential in that role. I wouldn't expect him to do it as a rookie, but again, do keep an eye on him. It's not a pretty pass rush. There's really no way around that. They rank 23rd. I do think they've upgraded this room from last year. It's just a matter of how much. Then we have the linebacker room. And again, tough to rank because of how hybrid this thing is. I'm starting to hurt my brain just trying to rank all these guys together because almost everyone here is playing two different positions. So bringing in Jamie Collins is going to be an automatic upgrade to what was one of the worst linebacker rooms in the NFL last year, right? You've got Jared Davis, who just has not been a good player, a first-round pick in 2017. Jelani Tavai, a second-round pick last year, that sort of oversized middle linebacker. Patricia's trying to get him to be this team's Donta Hightower. He showed some flashes last year, but is just not there as far as a good starting caliber linebacker at the moment. You had Christian Jones on the edge, outside linebacker spot last year. I think getting Julian Akwara is a potential upgrade there. So between Collins, Akwara, and Jones, those are your sort of edge linebackers. I like those pieces in this scheme. I think they'll do a good job as your hybrid outside backers in this scheme. Then you have the middle linebackers. That's a much bigger question mark. We just talked about Davis and Tavai. They are your projected starters. I'm not very excited if that's who ends up winning the job. You have about 4 deep, though, of players that I think can compete and challenge any of these guys for a starting job on the middle. So you have Elijah Lee, they pick up from San Francisco. Jalen Reeves-Maben, an athletic, almost borderline safety, a 4th-round pick in 2017. And beyond that, Jason Kabinda and Reggie Ragland, I actually think have a lot of potential at middle linebacker in this scheme. Reggie Ragland, to me, has potential to be a better version of Jelani Tavai as that bigger-bodied, thumping middle linebacker. He's not a good athlete. He's a liability in coverage. I think the same about Jelani Tavai, however. But in the run game, I think Reggie Ragland certainly has a lot of potential in this scheme. And then you have Jason Kabinda, who is a good, versatile linebacker who I like coming out of Penn State. Just has not been given an opportunity yet, but do keep an eye on him. So at the end of the day, this front seven with the 26th ranked run defense and the 23rd ranked pass rush really struggled last year a ton. But they have upgraded this front seven, and in year 3, I think Patricia has a chance to get these pieces to work better together. It's just a wait and see, however. Now we can talk about the defensive back. We're past the front seven that is really hard to break down, but I think we did a good enough job of it. Obviously going to be more traditional on the back end, and this team has put a lot of emphasis on the secondary despite trading away one of the better corners in the league in Darius Slay. Now, they've done a great job to make sure that they aren't weak at corner despite trading him away. So you get Jeff Okudah with the 3rd overall pick. One of the best cornerback prospects to come out in a long, long time. Now, he's not an elite athlete. I don't know if he's ever going to be Stephon Gilmore good. He could be. That was a very common comparison because of the amount of man coverage that Ohio State ran. And Detroit wants to replicate what New England did and run a lot of man coverage. But I do get it. He is a thick, smart, technically sound corner. I fully expect him to come in, despite being a rookie corner, and play like a at least high-end starter, especially in this scheme. So I like that. And then you bring in Desmond Trufant. Now, Trufant has traditionally played more of a zone-heavy scheme. He is definitely the type of athlete that can man guys up, and I thought that was an excellent signing to ensure a good 1-2 tandem as you kind of transfer away from Darius Slay here. So I love that 1-2 punch. And then you do have a very expensive nickel corner here in Justin Coleman, who struggled early for Detroit but settled in as time went on. I see him as a very capable, dare I say, even high-level slot corner. So the cornerback trio here is phenomenal. They're going to rank 10th in the secondary, and that's only being dragged down by the safeties here because the cornerback trio, we talked about the Chargers probably having the best cornerback trio. I think Detroit is in the top 5 for that conversation for sure, depending on how good Jeff Okudah is as a rookie. That's, we'll see what he looks like at the NFL level. But the safeties here are okay. I'm not going to shred them. It's just nothing super exciting. I do like Tracy Walker. He's a good, versatile safety. He's going to get used to like Devin McCourty in this scheme. He's going to play some free, play some strong. He's a good tackler, good athleticism, can man up guys, can play 2-high zone, can play single-high zone. So he's really versatile, the ideal safety for this defense. And then they bring in Duron Harmon. I don't think he's going to be a full-time starter here, but just like he did in New England, will play a ton in nickel and dime packages as a 2-high or even single-high free safety. Not the best in run defense. He is your true high shell free safety. I will say that him not starting is dependent on either Will Harris, a 3rd-round pick last year, and or Jaron Kearse, who was one of my favorite pickups in all of free agency this year. Showed a lot of good play for Minnesota, but was never given a full-time starting role. I think best case scenario, you go Tracy Walker and Jaron Kearse are your starters, and then you use Duron Harmon as that 3rd safety off the bench. But you do have question marks there with Harris, who had lots of ups and downs last year, being a 3rd-round pick, and Jaron Kearse. So if they can't step up, then you would probably be starting Harmon as a free safety. So there's your sort of starters, and that's leading to them being ranked 10th. There is some depth certainly to talk about here, though. So this corner room is not just 3 deep, they are 4 or 5 deep. So they bring in Darryl Roberts. Really good signing. I mean, he's a versatile guy, can play some safety, some corner. He's a good athlete, he can return kicks. That was an excellent signing. Another really good addition for this Lions team. They have Amani Oruwariye. He had no business being a 5th-round pick. He's lengthy, a phenomenal athlete. Did have some injury concerns coming out of Penn State, but he was probably a guy that should have been a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick, especially in my opinion. So as a second-year player, I like the idea of bringing in Trufant, who is physically similar to Amani Oruwariye, to start over Amani and almost mentor him. And in a year or two, maybe Oruwariye and Okudah are your long-term solution on the boundary. So this is a phenomenally deep corner room. We also went 4 deep at safety. You got some more bodies in here. Agnew is kind of a punt return specialist, but a good athlete, so maybe he can unlock something from a coverage perspective. And then you have Miles Killebrew, who's been really not a starting caliber player. A 4th-round pick in 2016 that they bring back here. And then they did pick up Jalen Elliott, a 21-year-old undrafted safety out of Notre Dame. So you have a ton of depth in this secondary. They've clearly focused on it, and it's a good unit. I think that I don't want to ever really say this defense could be top 10 because that's just way too optimistic. But there's going to be matchups when they're going against worse offensive lines where this secondary causes some real problems for teams. But I will say that this pass rush is such a concern that I don't really see this ever being a consistently elite pass defense because I think quarterback's going to have a lot of time. So that was a handful to go through that Detroit defense. A ton of players, ton of moving pieces. And it's going to be a handful for Matt Patricia to put it all together. They're going to rank 23rd. We'll see how it all works out. Let's take a look at the schedule here. So the start to the schedule is pretty tough. You start with Chicago at home. I do have them winning that. But then you go to Green Bay, Arizona, and New Orleans at home. So I do have them starting 1-3. And then I literally just have them rotating wins and losses for the rest of the year. It's just kind of the way it worked out. Ends up leading to a 7-9 season and a win range for me of 4-8. Their over-under, according to Vegas, is 6.5 wins, and I think that's about right. So if you wanted an answer from me on if Detroit was going to be anything more than an average football team yet again this year, maybe get some scrappy wins in there, but ultimately not really lead to a whole lot, my answer is no. I think that this Detroit team kind of is what they are, to be honest. We can try and say that everything's going to work, and the best case scenario for all of this is going to lead to a top 10 offense and a top, 15 defense, and they'll win 10 games and be a fearful team. But I just don't really give them the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think they have the star talent. The only player on this team outside of Stafford that I get excited about is Kenny Golladay. Everyone else, sure, might be a starting caliber player at every spot, but I just don't really see the upside. And then the question becomes, okay, 7 wins. Do we let Patricia go and start this thing all over again? This Lions team is just unfortunately very stuck. So while I'll give them some credit and rank them higher than a lot of people expected, I still don't think their organization is in the best place. So there is your Lions deep dive. I hope you guys enjoyed. We should be back on Wednesday with the 21st team. The pace of this series is probably going to pick up as we go forward into the rest of the summer here. I do hope you guys hit that like button. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.